right. Hi, everybody. Hello. Welcome in. Oh boy, I'm excited. um, so just to jump into this very, very quickly, just gonna jump right into things and get some bits out of the way. Welcome to the Crow's Nest. My name is Gray, or you can call me Qrowe, whatever makes you happy. I do uh, variety stream stuff. I am a DM for a D&D campaign called Puzzle Box, and for the first time today, we are doing a creator showcase called The Crow's Nest. Just to give you a little thing of how it's going to work here at Crow's Nest, this is a creator showcase, a chance to talk with our guests about their projects and themselves. There'll be direct questioning, topical conversations, and to keep things light, some fun bits of nonsense tossed in the mix because simply I can and I own the place. In my Discord, and if you type !form in chat, I have provided a form for the audience to submit questions for today's guest. Submissions are still open, so if you have a question you would like to ask during this interview, please post it there. Some I will be able to read, and others sadly I may not. I do apologize. But that being said, we will most likely not be focused on chat, but please don't let that dissuade you from sharing your thoughts, theories, and overall presence. We really do enjoy seeing you active nonetheless. But without further ado, I have the honor and pleasure of having Rommie, creator of the award-winning webcomic topical, prolific artist, and incredible D&D player, as our first Crow's Nest showcase. We'll be diving into their webcomic and all its contents from lore and characters to horror and abandoned environments. So, Rommie, thank you so goddamn much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm very glad.
Super excited. Excellent intro. Thank you. I'm so flattered.
Absolutely. I'm just being honest.
Back at you.
Y'all, thanks.
If anyone has seen how I've been advertising this around.
Yes, I saw your adverts for me. Very flattering.
There you go.
I was reading that and I was like, oh my god.
Just a Nerf gun fight of flattery. That's all this really is.
What a great image. So before we get into the main show of all this, I was having people ask me on the side, being like, so how did this all happen? How did you get to know this person? And I've had to mention it a bunch of times, so I want to talk about how we got here a little bit for anybody who is curious.
Yeah, absolutely.
So way back when I was starting my job, I want to say, actually maybe a little bit later. For those who don't know, I work night shift. And I was late night browsing Twitch for some forms of entertainment, particularly in the D&D section. And I was clicking through, and short of the long, I found Metanoia Blues, and very quickly became a gigantic fan. And after watching a bunch of the campaign and seeing what all the people involved were about, I figured, hey, these people are pretty cool. And turns out Rommie is a part of that. Rommie is a player in the wonderful D&D series. And me being a DM myself, for my campaign Puzzle Box, it got to a point in the story where I was thinking, hey, it'd be really good to have guests involved. And at first I was thinking, oh, I could get some people that I know, some friends, what have you. But then the more I was watching Metanoia Blues, I was like, it'd be really fucking cool if I could get the Meta Blue crew in on this. So I sent an email thinking, it might happen, might not. And after some time, oh boy, they became guests on the Puzzle Box. And as all that was formulating, we were getting everything together, I was doing a deep dive into everybody's creative endeavors and what have you. And I had heard mention of Soul to Call through Metanoia Blues, and I was like, oh, let me give this a look. I had never read a webcomic in my life, ever. And so I was like, sure, let me take a peek. And I'm pretty sure within the first 3 seconds of looking at the codex section on your website, I was like, I think my legitimate reaction was like, this is so fucking cool.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. And I had already had this crow's nest idea in my head that I wanted to do. And reading Soulcall, I was like, oh my god, there would be like no more perfect individual to have than Rommie for this. Let me bring it up and hopefully they're interested. And I did, and now we are here.
Here we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. I'm excited, obviously. I can say it till I'm blue in the face, but very happy about this because I fall in love with Soulcall. It was, like I said, it was my first like dip into like the webcomic world. Like I was a comic book kid growing up, and so I figured, why not? But it never clicked with me to read them online. I don't know why. I'm just old like that, I guess. But
that's fair. It's a slightly different experience from a book. So yeah, there might be a bit of a hurdle for some people to get into that kind of thing, and that's fine. That's just different mediums work for different people.
Yeah, well, it is just different mediums. So it was a good introduction.
Well, I'm glad.
But speaking of introductions, first and foremost, I did encourage all who I told about this interview to read your comic before today. But in case there are those joining us right now on Twitch or later on YouTube who may not have had the chance or are hearing about this for the first time, would you like to describe what Soulcall is about?
Yeah, so Soulcall, I generally call it it's a post-apocalyptic kind of horror story, but I usually more brand it as a supernatural drama because it tends to deviate from a lot of the norms that you might expect from a lot of popular post-apocalyptic and horror fiction, and that's part of the reason I wrote it to begin with. But yeah, I call it a supernatural drama because it's mostly about a group of characters wrestling with demons, both literal and otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And it follows them through a post-apocalyptic wasteland infested with blood magic and monsters, and it's really about their character journey through this terrible environment and finding strength in each other. And it's very much a found family story, that trope. Very, very much a huge element of Soulcall. So it's really a story about this group of people coming together with this world that's out to get them, full of monsters and things that are unexplainable and just insurmountable horrors, and finding strength in each other through that experience.
We love a found family story here. I really do.
You're in the right place then.
And secondly, gigantic congratulations to you on this near 10-year anniversary of Soulcall.
Yeah, damn. It even kind of snuck up on me, but yeah, on the 16th of this month, I'll be working on this comic for 10 years.
That's a
blows
long
my mind.
time. How does it feel to have 10 whole years of this wonderful comic out in the world?
It's so strange because if we really dive into the roots of Soulcall, I've essentially been working on this story and with these characters since very early on, like high school, 14 years old. It's kind of where I'd say these characters really started to cement. The story and characters have changed drastically and wildly since that point, but it feels like they've always kind of been here with me, growing and changing. And Soulcall is the culmination of so many years of that growing in my psyche.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yes, I've been working on it for 10 years, but it feels like it's been with me my entire life. So it's this strange sense of like, yeah, of course I'm at a decade of working on this comic. what else would I be doing with my brain?
That's incredible. That really is. There's a follow-up question to that from a viewer, McWigglestick.
I'm a Qwigglestick. Good name.
They're a staple here, and we love having them around. They asked a very interesting question that I got a giggle out of at the thought. Where do you see the comic in 2033? Another 10 years.
I mean, ideally, I'd like to have it done by then. Not for a lack of love, but like I would like to tell other stories and like spend my time doing other things. And obviously, a webcomic is a huge commitment.
Mhm.
So first and foremost, I want to see the story complete, not only so I have the ability to make different and new things without having to concern myself with keeping up with the webcomic. Again, not something I begrudge, but you know, time is time.
Time is time.
Not only to have it like completed in that sense, but also because I'm obviously very dedicated to making sure that these characters have a full narrative around them and that gets completed in one way or another so that it's not left hanging. I really don't want to leave it hanging. Right. So in 10 years, really would like to see it done. We're at a certain point now in the narrative where that seems possible. Like I have an idea of how things are going to go from here. So it's possible it's going to be done in 10 years. And in saying that, I mean, I really won't object to the idea of then kind of expanding the brand, quote unquote, to different things. Like I'm a huge video game nerd, love video games. A Solo Call game of any sorts would be like the dream come true. Solo Call is pretty much the production of me grinding a bunch of my favorite video games into a comic. So if that then comes out the other side as a game, that'd be great. There's so much lore and world building and stuff that I consider for the comic, but doesn't really take the spotlight of the comic itself. So I'd really love to work on different material that kind of allows more of the world building to shine through or to be expressed in different ways. Because the comic itself, and this is intentional, is very focused on the characters and their experience. So we don't like have a lot of deep dive into much of the nitty gritty lore for multiple different reasons. But I think about so much stuff that just does not come up in the comic at all. It influences how I write certain things or how the decisions I make, but it doesn't come up, and I can't really foresee it coming up in any blunt sense. It's gonna be a lot of like, here's this thing and it's doing this. Have fun. Even though I have like an intricate idea of what's going on under the surface and why it's behaving in this way. That goes for the magic, that goes for the monsters. So I think in 10 years, if I could expand beyond a comic to something that could explore different aspects and facets of the universe I've built beyond the limited scope of the characters, I think that'd be really fun. And it'd be a way to continue to nurture everything I've built without necessarily having to continue making the comic as it is. So I can continue to enjoy Solo Call, but all these other aspects of it that might not fit into the narrative I'm working on right now. So yeah, there's the long-winded question to 10 years from now. What would I like? I'd like to explore more parts of the comic, and I'd like the narrative I'm currently working on to be done.
That would be incredible. And a Solo Call video game, where's my wallet? Let me throw it from where I am to across the nation now. Absolutely.
I could still call them so many video game styles, but very early on, I always imagined a sort of Fallout style, like the more recent Fallout games. Say what you will about them, but the idea of being able to just kind of be thrust out into the world and explore it and just kind of make your own way through it. I think that'd be a really cool, and that's like huge scope. But again, I think about so many aspects of this world that just can't really be explored in the current narrative that I think it'd just be really fun to explore as someone just plopped into the world, and you get to look around and you get to find the notes and you get to find the sigils and you get to beat the cults, and just encounter them as an isolated explorer. There's just lots of little nitty-gritty things that I think would be really conducive to a game of discovery, like discovering little bits and putting them together yourself which is harder to do in a webcomic medium. But as a game, I see a lot of potential in the ability to just like be able to experience an environment and take in the lore of it and be able to actually study it really closely in that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I honestly, with everything that you're saying and all the stuff that you know that obviously I don't, but hearing how conducive it all sounds, to me that sounds like something that could be very full and something that I would just love to be thrust into. I mean, like my bias aside here for a moment, uh, like that sounds fantastic, and I search out games like that where it's
Mhm.
a like an environment, a world that is sure it could be horrible, it could be absolutely terrifying, but it's still something I guess fantastical that I could explore.
Yeah,
That
it's kind of
rocks.
fascinating, and yeah, in its own way, the mystery and the strangeness of a world like that.
Yeah,
I also seek out games of that nature, obviously.
right.
It's Soul to Call is pretty much a product of like what I want to see more of. So
I think we all can agree on that.
yeah.
Shakes hand in the good video game taste. Uh, so you had mentioned that these characters, this idea has been with you for a very long time, since you said what, 14, correct?
Yeah, somewhere around there. That's when they started really solidifying into something.
Okay, so then how? This is gonna sound very general, but how, where, and when did the idea to create Soul to Call begin?
Yeah, so Soul to Call itself, as we like understand it now, it happened late high school, like on that precipice of graduation kind of time. And I really wanted to rework the original story I had built around these characters, which is kind of more of an urban fantasy story. I was getting older. Some of the ideas that you find really interesting or cool as a teenager kind
Mhm.
of wear out or lose that cool factor as you get older and more experienced and more interested in like some deeper themes, for example. And I really wanted to rework that original story, that urban fantasy story, into something that I could actually make into a comic or a novel or what have you. I just wanted to take these characters and actually make them into something that I could put out into the world and share with other people. So it was grinding down that urban fantasy story and really like trying to figure out what I wanted to do with it. Um, and there were a few elements that came into play for that. It was, I would say, the predominant ones are threefold. Watching Zombieland the movie.
Oh,
Yeah, that's it. That's in here. That's a major influence. You
uh
might be surprised to find out. Playing the Last of Us video game, and having a general bone to pick with post-apocalyptic fiction and lesser so horror. And it's like those three elements kind of came together into figuring out what Soulfall was going to be. So the Last of Us, I feel, is the most obvious thing
mhm.
for anyone who's familiar with The Last of Us. It's a post-apocalyptic story about a guy and this teenage girl adventuring across the wasteland, and there's mushroom monsters trying to eat them and just generally end their lives. And it's a story very centralized on their relationship. So gestures to James, gestures to Averill.
Yeah.
What more do I need to say? Um, but The Last of Us was also a game that really reignited my passion for abandoned places that are overgrown, that are just taken over by Mother Nature. Always loved that. Always loved the aesthetic of that. But the experience of being able to explore it in The Last of Us games kind of reignited that. Oh, I really like this. I want to do something with this. I want to do something in a post-apocalyptic world that's not like Fallout. To again draw the comparison back to Fallout, but like invert it. Fallout is a nuclear wasteland.
Mhm.
Very little. I don't want to say wildlife. Very little greenery. Very little foliage is growing there. So I wanted to take that and just like the general attitude of post-apocalyptics being very gray or very dull and flip it on its head
Mhm.
and create a world that was horrifying but beautiful. and I feel like overgrown landscapes that were once, cities and societies kind of encapsulate that really well because it's something that's been destroyed or abandoned or forgotten, but then you've got this new life taking over top of it, this stubbornness that is mother nature that's just growing through the concrete and the cracks, and that became really foundational in the world I wanted to create because that felt so symbolic to other elements that I wanted to play with Soul to Call. So it was first figuring out the genre and the world, and reworking that from the urban fantasy it originally was. And I went through so many ideas after that of what I wanted to write exactly. There was a long time where I was trying to lean away from supernatural elements because it was the transitional period into adulthood, and like I have to base things in reality now, and I spent like maybe a few months considering. It's funny I say base things in reality. One of my ideas was aliens. So but eventually I realized I don't really like writing these things that are like super based in reality. I'm very much a person that loves to play with the psychological and the subconscious. So I was like, okay, we're going back to something more supernatural. Something funky's going on. I know exactly what's going on in the comic. I know everything about the fall, about the monsters, but none of you do.
Believe me, we all wish we did.
Yeah, in and out of universe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was a lot of building the world first, because obviously I had the characters, and I wanted to transition them over to this new world, but I really wanted the foundation of the world because the world would be the basis for the themes and the basis for the story.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of it being a representation of the themes I wanted to explore in terms of it, like conquering desolation, essentially, and the beauty and horrors of abandoned places. I also wanted the world to be incredibly, I don't want to say just violent, but inhospitable to the characters, because I really wanted an environment that would push them together. Because again, that was going to be another big theme I wanted to explore. Environments and characters going through just very hostile environments and conquering them, essentially. So I wanted a world that not only was going to be hostile in its very existence, being abandoned and having like scattered resources and not a lot of infrastructure, but also how that then bleeds into how people can behave and the societies that are rebuilt from such a volatile end, and just really use that to push the characters even closer together, because you've got this world where it's difficult to know who to trust, it's difficult to know what groups are actually having your best interest in mind, all that stuff. So that this is really long-winded, but the foundation really was the world first and foremost, and figuring out exactly what I wanted to do with that. And it was finding a lot of those elements and a lot of those themes. Zombieland then comes in and shows me a post-apocalypse, or apocalypse, I suppose, a zombie apocalypse, and this crew of misfits, just complete oddballs, coming together and having this like wacky fun road trip across this apocalyptic wasteland. And it was the first movie I'd seen in a long time that really spoke to the part of me that wanted to explore post-apocalyptic scenarios and their ability to be fun, I suppose, is a good way to describe it.
Yeah.
Because like I feel like there's a certain fantasy that a lot of people have where like we don't want to deal with the actual ramifications of an apocalypse. That'd be horrible. Right. But like I think you can agree there's a certain enjoyment in exploring places that are abandoned and have been left behind, and it's just you out there experiencing this world that's kind of been left behind.
Yep.
Yeah. There's a sort of magic to that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
that the exploration and the discovery, and just I don't know, I feel it deep in my soul. um just that experience of being in those places, and I'm not really a religious person, but it almost feels spiritual, and a strange sort of connection with the past, and just having, and also just having free roam of a
Mhm.
place with no one else around. There's just a lot of fun elements to the imagined apocalypse,
Yeah.
and Zombieland kind of tapped into that idea that, like, yeah, everything's kind of fucked, but we can have fun while we're here, right? We have each other. We have this grand, open, dangerous world, but we can have a little fun in it. Yeah, so that was also a big inspiration. And then finally, the bones I had to pick, and I've
Mhm.
kind of touched on those. But post-apocalyptic fiction, uh, at least at the time, it's in ways it's kind of shifted gears since I first started Soul to Call. But at the time, it was incredibly dire, incredibly depressing, and it's not that those scenarios wouldn't be, but I had a certain issue with the way it always portrayed, one, humanity as just default evil,
Mm.
and two, the idea of like the lone wolf being the correct approach to that scenario, when historically both are largely incorrect. Like, of course, there's outliers, but the lone wolf, like, we're community creatures. Lone wolves don't often last all that long. If you look at the actual, like, real life stories of people trying to go it alone in very harsh situations,
Mhm.
were made for communities. And in saying that, the whole idea that in dire situations, every single human is just going to become self-interested and brutal and not help anyone. We've also historically got plenty of records that show the opposite. Of course, there are people that react to dire situations by being incredibly selfish, by having to do incredibly, just terrible things. But I feel like so much post-apocalyptic fiction ignores the other side of it. It ignores that humans are neutral creatures. We're not evil or good largely. We are community creatures that want to survive, and part of how we survive is by coming together and having that community, and that structure and that support with each other. And I just felt this continual frustration with post-apocalyptic fiction for focusing so much on lone wolves and brutality. And I think there's always a place for exploring those concepts in fiction, but at the time I just didn't see the opposite anywhere, and
Mm.
I really wanted to explore the opposite of all of that.
Absolutely incredible. And boy, could I not agree with you more about
Oh, good.
the post-apocalyptic media thing, cuz that was on my mind when I was thinking of questions to ask you. So, um
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
I I have obviously my personal bone to pick with it as well, obviously. But no, I totally and completely agree. There has been a lot of that lone wolf thing, and just always brutality, whatever, and seeing it in Soul Call be the complete opposite. I was like, finally,
Someone gets it.
somebody
Right.
knows. And in like a to bring it back to what you said, that that humanity is very like group oriented, like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah,
I think people
for
kind
better
of
or
forget
worse.
that. Yeah,
Like,
for
I have cults in my story, obviously, so like I can
right.
see the dark side of community as well. That's part of the point. But
Right.
yeah, community.
Community in whatever form humanity is very prone to be a part of. And I find that a lot of people just kind of forget that, whether it's in a media to absolutely romanticize or fantasize something. you know
Hmm.
they'll dodge and weave whatever seems more real for a suspension of disbelief. But there was a lot of that suspending of disbelief, and
Yeah.
seeing it being different was definitely a nice breath of fresh air and cup of tea, at least for me. So
Oh, I'm glad. That was the goal. I made it for people who might also be feeling the same way about that kind of whole thing.
You absolutely hit the nail on the head, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, to go a little bit back into everything that you were saying, you, if I was hearing you correctly, the first, I guess, specific part of Soul Call that you created was the world, right?
Yeah.
So, and you went through different iterations of like what that world would be like, but I guess, has the first image of what you thought the world would look like, as far as like just visual appearance, has that stayed the same since its inception in your imagination?
Well, interestingly enough, one of the very first concepts of Soldical had people living in domes across what we now know as the no man's land instead of like kind of walled in cities. It was like full on dome world. Because like the hostility at that point was so intense that we needed a ceiling on our communities to keep them safe at that point. I think that was the biggest visual difference at the beginning that I first played with, and it stuck around long enough for it to kind of stay in my memory. I like drew a couple concepts for that. I don't think I have them available because they were in a sketchbook. But yeah, that's one that stuck with me, and one that kind of expresses just how dangerous the world was in its first concepts.
Yeah.
But that was toned down a bit. There are abominations that fly, but not quite that well. So we don't have to worry about them in quite that way. Another part of the world that kind of shifted the more I actually got my hands on the comic and visualizing it is there was originally the idea that there would be a lot more twisted landscapes that didn't necessarily make physical sense. And that ended up kind of being relegated more to the foggy areas. And we're probably going to see more of that in the near future, but it ended up not manifesting so much in the main world because, for one, I wanted the contrast, and two, I found the twisted landscapes a little bit difficult to write in the ways that I wanted to write the characters behaving. I didn't always want the world to be too nonsensical or too hard to grasp because I felt like that would start to distract both from the impact of the actual fog appearing of the dreamscapes I explore, but also the characters having their moments. It would kind of give the environment a little bit more attention than the characters, and would also pull them a bit too far away from society, because we still have characters who are grounded in a world, and especially for a long form comic, suspending them in that dream space, it gets a bit hard to continue to wrangle into a grounded character story. So I started to really pare down where the really outlandish parts of the landscape and the really twisted and nonsensical parts of the landscape were, once they would be highlighted when they came up, and so they wouldn't distract with where the narrative was supposed to be, and like bring up questions of how are these characters eating, or what have you, because everything is kind of weird and fucked up because we still had these characters who were going through some very real problems, and I just wanted that progression into madness instead of the world kind of being mad all the time. We have our little spots like the monsters, but yeah, so there was the domes, and then there was like everything being extremely more visually and environmentally fucked up.
That is absolutely wild. I love that. That's very, very cool. Well, thank you for sharing those bits.
Yeah.
And to detract from the serious conversation, like I said, fun questions involved. Rommie, before we dive any further, what's your favorite band?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is "Sleeping at Last," but there's also "Sleep Token." Lots of sleep there. Those are like two widely different genres, because one's very like melancholic and guitars, and the other one just tends to be metal, metal and some very emotional songs.
Mm.
I feel like that captures my writing pretty well, honestly. Um, yeah, so like those are the two. Those are the two that probably. I know Mim at least will be like sleeping out. Sleep Token, right? It's Sleep Token again. You're about to show me a Sleep Token song, aren't you? No.
As a fellow Sleep Token fan, I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Are you about to show me the Sleep Token thing? No.
Yeah. Look, it's different. It's from a different album.
Incredible. So
there's multiple Sleep Token songs on the Soul's Call playlist, and I've also assigned Sleep Token songs to all of the characters and the main characters of Men in White Blues. So that's where I'm at. So I'll just say that for easy's sake. I love music, listen to all kinds of music, but that's the first one to come to mind, so I'll say that.
Right on. And having listened to those playlists, I know.
Hundreds of tracks in all of those.
Mm-hmm. Listen, your playlists have got me through many long drives, so thank you.
I'm glad to hear that.
So, to kind of move away from the general beginnings of Soul to Call, I want to, dive a little bit more specific, and I personally wanted to ask a few specific bits of the lore about the world and characters.
Yeah, sure.
So one that really caught my attention, like I had said previously on your website in the codex section, that whole section caught my eye. There are these sigils of bloodmancy. And you have a fun little interactable where you can hover over them and it will tell you what they do in context to bloodmancy. Loved that, by the way. Did any of these sigils have, I guess real world, shall we say, occult inspirations for their design and purpose, whether it was entirely or partially, or were they completely from your imagination?
Yeah, well, when I first started kind of conceptualizing bloodmancy and the magic system, the first place I looked was the Key of Solomon.
Yep.
Yeah, that was like my basis. Is I started to dip into that and read about summoning demons and stuff, fun things.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it started a lot with researching a lot of occult stuff, so the Key of Solomon and alchemy to an extent, and just generally looking at a lot of different sigils and magical circles and whatnot. But I didn't really want to base the magic system in any known occult things. There's a reason for that.
Right.
And I'm going to be saying that a lot and then not elaborating. There are some circles that you can see are like lifted almost wholesale from the Key of Solomon, but again, there's a reason for that. And it's not that magic is actually based in that old book or that old text. So to answer the question more shortly, it is a lot of my own imagination. I actually designed a lot of the sigils based on just this little guide I found about making your own sigils if you practice like witchcraft and stuff, which was based around writing out your intention in words, taking out all the nouns, and then taking the letters that remained and mixing them up into a sigil. And I started to design the sigils off of that, because a lot of the magic is a lot of the bloodmancy. There's a lot of intention that's fueling it. So, and I don't mean that from a meta standpoint, I mean that from a very real in-world standpoint. And so the idea of designing sigils around the idea of writing out an intention and then scrambling it up into a sigil played into the lore quite well. So that's how I started to design the sigils, and I would throw in the visual aspects to make it kind of correspond with what the sigil was going to do. For example, we have it looks like a little stick man with a diamond body, and that's for pretty much making a decoy sacrifice. and it looks like a little person. So that, and you put a little sigil inside that sigil, and then you put it in a box and you mail that to yourself. Yeah, so that's like one of the more blatant examples. We've got one that like pierces holes in things, and it's like very spiky sigil with a bit of a dent in one side, and that kind of illustrates that. But they're also just designed pretty much around letters. I would write out the intention of the bloodmancy that this was supposed to manifest, and then I would mix it up. And there's lore reasons for why the actual characters, the actual people who designed these sigils to begin with that function in this way, did this, and that it worked. So it's not just me taking a guide and going, yeah, I'll design my sigils this way. There's like even deeper lore reasons. Like this is how the characters would also do it, because this is how they got it to work. And then it just became commonplace.
That is very cool, and I wish you could see my facial reactions as you were talking, because I'm giving the look of like, oh really? Oh, that's very cool. So the in-lore reasons of how this all happens, how this works. Excuse me. Is that something that you can explain, or is that going to be a spoiler of how this magic works, or?
I've always wanted to write a guide, essentially, of kind of how bloodmancy works as the characters understand it. So I can kind of explain it in that way, in how the characters understand how it works and how they got it to work.
Please.
Yeah, so what's a good place to start? So obviously, bloodmancy was not a thing before the Fall, which is a post-apocalyptic event, how it's known as in the comic. That was something that appeared after all of that fun stuff went down, you know, all the death and the appearance of the monsters. And it was something that was generally slowly discovered by the characters of the world. There was a lot of blood to go around, and a lot of people doing weird shit to cope with the weird shit coming out of the sky and out of the fog, and you know, it's just people get up to things. And to put it mildly, to put it lightly,
people do shit.
Yeah. Yeah, and through doing shit, slowly people started to realize that there was essentially power in blood and bloodmancy, and slowly but surely, like, one thing I like to think about too is that the sigils that we see in the comic aren't the only sigils that will do these things or work. There are probably different, like, dictionaries of sigils depending on where you are in the world. Because this isn't a magic system that is based on what sigils you are using. It's based on a certain amount of what you are intending being channeled into that symbol. And that symbol can be something else, but essentially, if you have a strong enough conviction that it's going to work this way, and you are reinforcing that with these symbols, then you can start to shape it into the magic. And this comes with also a certain, there's the chance, which is also an important element in it, because it's about sound waves as well. That's why a recording can also work. It's not just a person speaking or a person chanting. As we see in one of the later chapters, we just have a tape player, and it almost blows a hole in the world. So it's a combination of intent that has been imbued into this symbol, and sound waves starting to combine together to reshape reality, essentially. And that combination is what creates the blood magic and what it does, but it doesn't sustain itself. That's why you have, like, you can make holes in walls or holes in people, but they tend to reform because you're trying to bend a constant reality with a temporary influence of sound and intention. So that's why a lot of bloodmancy, it'll just kind of revert as soon as the chant stops, or as soon as the sigil is removed or destroyed. It's sustaining itself. with intent and with sound. But it is combating a much more cosmically powerful force. We are meager humans with meager little bodies full of blood trying to reshape reality, and it's not gonna stick. I'm sorry. Yeah, so it's a lot to do with the person doing the bloodmancy as much as it is about the symbols themselves. That's why other symbols can work, because it's a lot about what intention you are putting in and what you are drawing to this sigil through intention, rather than just these are the cool little symbols that do the cool little things, and that's all you need to know. It takes a lot of mental commitment and energy to get them to actually work the way that's intended. So yeah,
that is so fucking cool. I have no eloquent way to say that otherwise. That is so fucking cool. And and for somebody such as myself who has I don't want to say it this way, but who has studied things of, like occult, alchemy, variety, because I went to school for a couple things, but one of them was cultural anthropology, and that involved diving into those things and hearing the similarities of there is intent there, and even the sound wave part. I'm sitting here, I'm like, my anthropology brain is going crazy. I
can imagine. Yes.
That makes it feel so much more, I guess the word would be full to me. It feels like it's got more substance than, like you said, you just have the sigils and, oh boy, you can do whatever you want. No, there's more to it. That is really cool and really incredible that you have parsed that out for the lore. I love that very, very much.
Yeah, there's an example of like how I think about so many things that go into this comic that just generally don't come up in the narrative itself, or don't have really a place where someone's going to sit down and tell you about the interplay of sound waves and intent in bloodmancy, because everyone already knows. We're trying to survive it actually right now. We don't need to know how it works. We just need to stop it. Yeah.
That's so cool. And you answered one of my other questions, which I personally didn't fully know, and I didn't know if it was something secret, but bloodmancy not being around before the fall. Personally, I didn't know that. So thank you for answering that question.
Yeah, it's kind of not a not obvious thing, but because the order, the hint is that the order hunts down and tries to destroy everything that manifested after the fall, and that's why there's such like bloodmancy allowed, except maybe in some cases we might be dabbling in bloodmancy. But don't pay no attention to that. That's not important.
Don't look behind the curtain.
Yeah. Pay it no mind.
Quick, get the mop. That's very, very, very cool. And something that seems to tie in with bloodmancy, and that is very specific to Eli, that has been brought up many times with his character. What exactly is light, and how is it that, I guess, bloodmancy manipulates that, from what I'm understanding? I have my thoughts about a few things, but I want to hear it straight from the source.
Yeah, so I feel like the most basic way to explain it is like, light is the power that is imbued in the blood, essentially. You see it when blood is spilled. You can see it like it maintains its quote-unquote light for a little while. You said yourself, yeah, it does play a major part in how bloodmancy works. The light is essentially a visual representation of what is giving the blood power, and we can see from the ways that Eli vision, Eli vision in the comic, displays the lights, and all of them are like different colors. And it's talked about directly by him that everyone has a different light and it has different properties, different colors. It feels different, like emotionally to him. So from there, you can kind of put together that these lights are the power of these lights represent power in the blood, and the power of the blood is then something that you could then arguably call the human aura or the human spirit. It is the engine of it is quite literally the human heart, the engine of all bloodmancy, of all light, of all this power is this humanity, these experiences we have that build us into emotional beings, and then that manifests into this colorful lights, and our experiences impact that light and can change the potency of our blood. It's just the light is the engine, the engine to the bloodmancy, and it all starts from just being human and being this full experience of the world condensed into a body. It's a powerhouse for these powers that then you want to try and use to manipulate the world around you. It all starts in this condensed version of the universe experiencing itself in this body, in the blood, and the blood is just the best way I could think of to represent all of that, if that makes any sense. I feel like I went off into the stratosphere a bit there, but
that's more than welcome. And honestly, it makes sense to me. I really, I'm gonna be obviously sharing my opinions like nobody's business this interview, but I really like that. I love that. And you know, I like my thought of how certain things was like, this was like people's auras, how they have different colors, and how like certain people are like, oh, the auras change with people's like emotions and how they are as a person and all those things. So I don't know, makes sense to me. And I really love the angle that you have presented here, and saying the heart as the engine. My little Qrowe man here doesn't exactly show it, but I'm like eyes going wild. I'm like, that is very cool. But speaking of Eli, I kind of want to dive into the characters a little bit. Don't want to leave these guys unattended to.
Sure.
Want to talk about at least the main four, that being Avril, Eli, Tiffany, and James. If you don't mind telling us a little bit about each, and what inspired their creation. And I need this last one because I need to know which one of them I can be friends with, so it's very important. What is their favorite ice cream?
Oh, I see. Game we're playing. Yeah, so I guess we can go down the roster here. Avril, first and foremost. Her base conception was two elements. And one was, I really want a character that can do parkour through my wasteland. I just want that. I just want a character that's capable of that. Yeah. So that was one of her first qualities. And the other was, I knew I wanted her to be a bit of a smart aleck, smart mouth teenager, and just add a bit of comedic flair to this horrible, horrible world I was building. I really wanted her to be the contrast to the world and to keep things light for the reader. One thing I didn't want to do with Soul to Call was just to have it be a misery fest. And Avril was kind of one of my first lines of defense against doing that. Was just making her someone that tries to make light of all the horribleness around her, to varying degrees of success. And if that's doing good things for her psychology, it's debatable, but it's something she does. Yeah, so that was the first thing that kind of reformed Avril into her current iteration. And then there's obviously her main storyline, which was finding her dad and reconciling with whatever fucked up shit is going on in that regard. Yeah, it was just taking those elements and building a character that was trying so hard to be just this lighthearted presence in this horrible world and just like take things in stride. But internally, she's dealing with a lot. She's very alone. This character that seems like she would maybe be quite the introvert and, maybe have a lot of friends is just extremely isolated, extremely alone, extremely sad. And I just wanted to play with that contrast with her of like, yeah, okay, you see this character and she's really goofy and fun, but there's something going on deep down in there, and some of you are going to catch that red flag sooner than others in terms of how she jokes about the world around her, and just really just start to dig into that and the damage underneath the comedy. So that was April. And in contrast, I've always liked the kind of dichotomy of the really rambunctious, loud girl and the kind of more demure, shy guy. So that was like the dynamic that I first wanted to explore with April and Eli. So Eli comes part and parcel with the creation of April as kind of the shy and the more timid one, the one who has been through hell and still has a lot of morality that he's struggling with, and he's struggling with the idea that these things have been done to him, and he still doesn't know what to make of them, because deep down he doesn't want to be just like angry and lash out and hurt people, but he has all this like power to do that. He does. And meeting someone who is also damaged, been through hell, but has reacted to it in a different way, and just having them play off each other and try to figure out through the interactions that they have with one another how exactly they want to deal with what they've been through, how they want to process it, how they want to move forward. And because they've had kind of really contrasting reactions to it, Eli, who's trying to really run away from everything that he's been living with all of this time, and April, who is trying to recapture what she used to live with, which may or may not have been good as well. Just the two of them have those points of similarity, but also contrast, and just I really wanted that dynamic of the two of them being able to play off each other and learn from each other. And yeah, in the later chapters, we are starting to see bits and pieces of how they are growing by being next to each other. So that little dynamic was one of the foundational parts of character creation for Soul to Call. Is like I wanted this little dynamic of two damaged people with very contrasting personalities and responses to be put together and see what happens. And then I wanted a dad. Then I wanted a dad to help shepherd these two damaged individuals. But of course, we can't have this father figure in the post-apocalyptic scenario come along and not have his own damage.
Right.
Yeah. So enter James O'Brien. He was originally just a creation of like really love adoptive dad characters. One of my favorites is this like, don't have any children of my own, but I'm adopting every child I come across now, I guess. Begrudgingly. I guess I have to protect you with my life now. James came along in his humble beginnings as just the guy that was going to have to take care of these two idiot kids that just made up. So he's obviously was kind of very, very military, and that he was the guy with the guns. He was the survivalist. He was the mercenary. And it grew from there. Obviously, I didn't want him to be just the simple, rugged guy. I started to really explore what made him that way, what he actually wants to be, because we're playing with contrasts of where they are, what they're doing, and what they want to be. So another thing, of course, that I wanted to play with him was the representation of masculinity and men in stories. To get into that a bit, I really strongly believe in representing men as equally very emotionally complex as women, and or anything in the orbit of that.
Mhm.
Whatever you identify with, I'm non-binary, so it's like, but yeah, and so I really wanted him to really show blatantly his love and care, even if he really tried to stifle it, instead of just trying to play him off as a character that was gruff and always in control of his emotions and always super stoic. He is super stoic. He is very much I don't want to say in control of his emotions, because I feel like that's a kind of he's repressed a lot. And it became a lot of exploring what that did to him, what that repression of all of these emotions and all these feelings have done to him. And now that he's in this position where he can take care of other people, when previously he's not really been able to do that, then we start to see all this repression of all these feelings come out. And he's fortunate enough to be in a community that helps him encourage that in a healthy way. And that's just something I really wanted to explore with James's character, is just the deeper emotional depths of stoicism and what that does to someone and how you get there. All wrapped up in a package of a suffering dad character. And Tiffany is again a kind of goes hand in hand with James, in that I really wanted a platonic sister brother kind of dynamic. Again, plays into the idea of found family and adoptive family. I really wanted them to have a sibling dynamic, so that was one of the initial ideas with Tiffany's. I wanted her to be the sister to James, so she was designed with that in mind, and that's part of what influenced her very bubbly personality. They're very like, oh, everything is cool and fine and I'm happy all the time, which if you haven't noticed a theme at this point, it's that everything that these characters are presenting forward facing is not what's going on in the subconscious, is not what's going on deeper down. But on the surface level, we have the stoic character James, and then the contrast of Tiffany, who is super just nice and bubbly and fun and friendly and very, very oriented in people. She was the people person. And another aspect that made her like a companion character to James was that she was more the brains of the operation. Not to put down James, but James he shoots gun. He can make military strategic plans, but if we're talking like long-term planning, if you don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of these characters don't have long-term plans. They have just, let's just get through tomorrow. Tiffany is the contrast of that, where she's the long-term planner. She's the one who watches people and knows how they behave and knows how to make friends and make connections. And she has that, that's kind of something that she has that a lot of the other characters don't, is her ability to make connections and read people in that way. We see in the scene in the comic chapter 6, I believe, where she's talking with Eve, and I feel like that's such a representation of Tiffany as a character and where her strengths lie in comparison to the other characters, who like Eli's more magically and emotionally oriented, Avril and James are more like physical force oriented. She's the people person, and so she became the face, to put it in like almost D&D terms, of the group. She became the one that could make the connection. She could talk to the people, she could make the plans and understand the larger ramifications of what everyone is doing, and that became an important part of her character, to be the one that was going to help guide the rest of these chuckle fucks along to something possibly productive, because the first half of the comic is a lot about James, Avril, and Ela, like, let's just get through today, let's just get through this town full of cultists, let's just get out of here with our heads still attached to our shoulders. And it's when Tiffany comes in that we enter the arcs where like we're planning a prison escape. Essentially, we're planning where we're gonna go. We're planning what we're actually gonna do. So Tiffany became an important element in that regard as the planner, as the one who was going to get the story on track instead of just have the characters trying to survive and figure out what's happening in the next hour. Tiffany's like, I know, I can help with that. Yeah, so it's always hard to say what inspired characters because it becomes a lot of like little bits and pieces that I've picked up along the way that just ends up coalescing into these characters for certain dynamics I want to play with or certain ideas I want to play with. So it's hard to say like, well, X inspired James. Yeah, well, unless you want to count Leon Kennedy's general aesthetic, yes, I did lift that for James. Shamelessly. It got Mim into Resident Evil, so like I can't complain.
That's a win. Win's a win.
Yeah.
Listen, I love James. I really do. I love how Leon he does appear. Like day one, I saw him like, hey, look, Leon.
Yeah, there he is,
my boy.
I don't try to deny it. It's absolutely I like that. I'm taking it.
Listen, what is there not to like about Leon Kennedy? I'm gonna be honest. I'd kiss that man on the mouth.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not even inclined, but you know what? I feel like he could use some affection. For you, Leon.
Anything, Leon.
The world's put you through shit.
Incredible. And I am pushing. What is their ice cream? What is their favorite ice cream? All four of them. I gotta know. This is important to my person.
I'd say Eli probably chocolate chip. He's a chocolate kind of guy, chocolate kind of kid. It's so sad that my first thought, I feel like James would just accept whatever you give him. He's just happy to eat.
Oh no, buddy, no.
What is his favorite ice cream? I don't know. Surviving to the next day would be nice.
Oh, I want to cry now.
It's okay to want nice things.
Oh no.
Yeah. For Tiffany, I'm like, she'd like the little ice creams that are shaped like characters or things. She'd like a fun ice cream. She'll take whatever, but if it's fun, it's shaped fun, she can tell a story about it.
Hell yeah.
You know?
All right.
it's just like, give me like, what is it, 12 more of these blonde bitches kind of scenario. Little Bubbles Powerpuff Girls ice cream thing. That's Tiffany's vibe.
Awesome.
Yeah. April, my inclination there is also strawberry. So I'd be like, it's red.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel like she'd also steal everyone else's ice cream, so, you know.
Respect. April, I will break your hand if you take mine.
Okay. She grew up in a military academy. She knows when to lay off. There's some lines you just don't cross. You just don't get between a man and his ice cream sometimes.
Exactly, especially me. For those who know me, God, I am an ice cream fiend. I love my ice cream a little too much. All right, I can get along with all of them. James, buddy, hug?
You need some help.
What do you want? Come on, tell me.
You're gonna need to wait like 3 to 5 business days for him to figure that out.
That's fine. I'm a patient man.
I think we now know what he wants. It's come up recently. What he wants.
It has.
Yeah.
Another fun little question to toss in there. If the characters were in the real world, what crime would they get arrested for, or what crime would they get away with?
Well, Tiffany would get away with everything, and that's both in canon and in any other universe you put her in. She is routinely the one committing crimes, and nobody knows. She's like the businesswoman that is all put together and doing everything above board, but really the above board is her. She has such a whisper network of information brokering bullshit going on underneath whatever prim and proper exterior is going on. So Tiffany is like who you call if you want, like, hey, for reasons I need this person doxed to me specifically. Like, I got you. I'll find out where they live. I'll find out the name of their childhood pet. I'm on it.
I'll tell you their shoe size even.
Yeah. Did you need their shoe size? I just got it. It's just like it's a loose leaf in this folder I'm presenting you. Just in case you needed that.
Oh, incredible. I know I love Tiffany.
She's fun. James, I don't want to say murder, but he's not inclined towards violence. His whole thing is like he doesn't want to be violent, but he's also like incredibly protective. So I feel like not only is he incredibly protective, he's also incredibly accident prone. He gets into bad situations so easily. I just feel like he's gonna get into a fight, not because he wants to, but because the world demands it. And he's just like, okay, I don't want to do this, but I also am not going to die here, so someone has to go.
Oh no.
So at least assault. But the other guy started it, okay?
Oh no. I keep saying oh no because my basically sister, I got her reading Soul Call, and she says to me, she says, Gray, why does James equal you? I said, no, don't do this to me.
Oh no.
Don't do this to me. And the two things that you just said of accident prone and the world demands it, so he's gonna have to fight for his life. When she listens to this, she's going to call me and say, I told you, the creator even says it. Look, shut up. Don't.
Not intentionally. See, the lucky thing about James is, like, Nim also mentioned in the chat there, he's going to get framed for shit he didn't do. Also very possible. Another thing, he's like, routinely in, like, alternative universe role plays I've done for fun, is, like, he gets in trouble basically for breaking, like, the rules of whatever military he's a part of. Like, that's a big one that I should bring up with him. Is like, he'll be like, this ain't right. I'm gonna defect, and that's his crime. It's like, my moral compass says no, actually. So, in the comic, we see that manifest in how he has pretty much broken every contract we've seen him enter into. That involves maybe questionable people. Yeah. The lucky thing about James is that he has Tiffany, again, companion characters, and she's like, oh, you've ended up in this bad situation where the powers that be are probably going to charge you with something, and it's not necessarily your fault. I got you. I'll sweep that under the rug so good.
She is his defendant and prosecutor.
Yes, absolutely. She plays every corner of the Ace Attorney, Ace Attorney room, courtroom.
Oh, I love it.
Just a quick change outfits, and suddenly she's on the other side. She's also on the witness stand.
Give me that mod, please.
April. Also, she has a wanted poster, and it has a lot of the crimes that she might end up falling into in a more modern world, which is like, she's got a short fuse. She might punch a bitch. So, another assault charge there. And punch a bitch is the lightest thing she might do. She also tends to carry around things like baseball bats and crowbars. So, yeah. So potentially that, but on a lesser extreme extent. Breaking and entering would probably be what she would get in trouble with, or as far as breaking and entering goes, when you're climbing on top of a building that maybe you shouldn't be climbing on top of. If you get caught and arrested for like, I'm climbing on a building and this is super dangerous to me, but I'm gonna do it. I don't mind. It's like, no, this is dangerous. It's like I measured out the danger in my brain and I decided this was an acceptable risk, and I'm up here now. Basically, the crimes of a cat that gets up in a tree and you're like, I really need you to come down and come home because you're an indoor cat and you should not be out here for multiple reasons. That's April.
April, my homie.
Yeah, she's just climbing stuff, getting in trouble for it. Because in the modern world, there's people who don't want her climbing stuff.
And those people are cowards. Yes,
absolutely, 100%. Eli, the first thing that comes to mind for Eli is I feel like, what's the best way to describe it? I don't even think he'd get caught for it, but he might steal pets from people who aren't treating them well.
That's awesome. Oh, that's so good.
Like, if he's walked by the same house for multiple days and there's obviously this dog who's just been left outside, chained to a tree, and he's got a little dog house and a bowl of water, but it's obvious he's not being taken care of. Eli's gonna show up with like bolt cutters and be like, you're mine now, actually.
Yes.
I can't keep doing this.
Oh, that's amazing. I love him.
Just packs the dog into James's car and is like, drive. And he's like, what? Where did the dog come from?
Don't ask questions, James. Drive.
Yeah, we need to go. So that's the most likely crime. That and potentially causing a biohazard because he bled on something.
Whoops.
Yeah, that just happens.
Oh, that's awesome. And to pick up with Eli, a more serious question. I noticed for Eli during chapter 8, I'm just going to call it issue 25, Eli uses the Qrowe word for grandmother / your grandmother. How versed with the language is Eli?
Yeah, he's about as, like, unfortunately, a lot of people who are Qrowe, like, they have varying degrees of familiarity with the language, unfortunately, due to colonialism and the attempt to destroy the language. So I'd say Eli has about the familiarity with the language that people who have been fortunate enough to grow up in around others who are either relearning the language or just trying to revive it. So he knows a lot of the words that would be used for familial connections and some basic words for animals and other varying items. But unfortunately, he, for the last few years, not had a close connection with his family, so he hasn't been able to build on that knowledge. But he has that baseline that was ingrained in him at a young age, so he has the knowledge of a few of the very basic words that someone who has grown up around the language would know. But he would absolutely like to continue to build that knowledge, and who knows, maybe that will come up later in the story.
That'd be very nice.
Yeah. So, and that's definitely something I wanted to include because I think it's very important to bring that kind of stuff up, especially considering his character and his origins. Yeah. So.
Absolutely. I had pinged that. I was like, wait a minute, because of, again, my schooling stuff, I recognized the language just a little bit. I was like, why does that look familiar to me? And I did a quick Google. I'm like, that's why.
Yeah.
But I love that you had included that, and I am in complete agreement. I think that's very important as well. So
yeah. Just as a white writer, I'm white. I just really try to put in the research and the respect for the characters I'm writing and the races I'm writing them within. Is I know where I stand, and I just try to be as respectful as I can on that front. And part of that is not writing as if these characters don't have that culture ingrained in them. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And more about Eli, wonderful boy. This question's in big capital letters because I need to know this. Is it anathema or anathema?
I pronounce it anathema. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure that is how it's pronounced. That's how I remember hearing it be pronounced. So
Thank you.
You wouldn't be the first. I think, was it Mim? Mim, feel free to let me know. I feel like Mim doesn't say the word out loud, or maybe I'm misremembering, because they never know how to say it properly. So I feel like it's one of those instances. Kind of, I'm the one who coined metanoia in Metanoia Blues. So I'm the one who's always bringing these like really obscure words to people and like, hey, let's use this for our title and or a major component of the story. And then nobody knows how to pronounce it properly. I know another friend of mine definitely does. Not Mim. I see Mim in the chat like, not me, not anymore. Okay. But this is a common problem.
Okay, glad I'm not the only one. I was looking. I'm like, what? How did? Thank you. You've
whatever your heart desires, my friend. It's like a sigil in Bloodmancy. It's about intent.
And not done with Eli here. To go back to Light, Eli obviously talks about it a lot for very obvious reasons. How much does he know about it, and did somebody explain it to him, or has he learned all by feel?
Yeah, he's learned kind of all on his own. A major part of Eli is that he hasn't really had a lot of contact with many other anathema / red eyes, depending on which term you want to use. So he has had to kind of feel it out all on his own. One of the original ideas I had with the comic was not only that different people would have different words for light, but different people would have different words for the abominations. I ended up just having everyone use the same word because it was easier to keep track and not confuse the readers that way. But it's still, in my mind, kind of the same way the sigils aren't locked in as like this is the symbol that represents this thing. There's lots of different names that people have come up with because lots of people have had to, and Eli's one of them. And Light is how he learned on his own to describe what he was seeing. Other people might call it auras or some such, but he has had to come up with his own terms for it. He has had to come up with like what it is and what it does and how it feels. It's all just been him feeling it out on his own.
Poor boy.
Yeah, that's an undercurrent for most of these characters. Like, man.
Impressive though, nonetheless, that, you know, at least to me, he has figured it out the way that he has. And, you know, whether it's, you know, completely accurate or not, he is understanding it the way that he does. And he's making it work. So...
he's certainly doing his best.
Doing his best. That's all that we can ask of him at this point.
Truly.
Yeah. Moving away from Eli. Avril. So, since leaving the district, has Avril been on their own like the whole time up until meeting everybody else?
Yeah, essentially. The timeline between when she left the district and when we meet her in the narrative is it's only a year or two, so it's not like she's been super long, but she has been essentially alone that entire time. She has had contact with people because she's been taking courier jobs, but yeah, she's been pretty much trying to go it alone that entire time. That's why we see her talking to herself at the very beginning of the comic, is like she's pretty much all she's had for a very long time. and she's immediately throwing things at the first sign of human life that she comes across.
Yeah, she does do that.
Yep. So yeah, she's been very alone since the little incident, the twofold, very troubling incident at the district that made her leave. Yeah. So a lot of these characters come from situations of isolation in some way or another, and it's just another reason that it's really important that they form this community together to them. And Averill is no exception. She's very alone, and she might have been very alone before she even left the district, but she's been physically very alone since.
I'm gonna be saying this a lot. Oh, homie.
Yeah. That truly is the subtitle of the comic.
Yeah. Let's see. James, my boy. My man. Obviously very competent in combat. Is it a spoiler to know where he got his training?
It's been hinted at pretty heavily, but I guess I'm a bad judge at that. But we have seen some instances, mostly in his dreams and vaguely in like some photographic material that appears on like chapter splash pages of older man that he has referred to as his father, who is wearing a military jacket, and James also has dog tags. So from there you can get some ideas of where the training might have begun. It began very young. I'll give you that.
Which is terrifying.
Yep. It's not good. Yeah. And we're going to get a little bit more into exactly where both James and Tiffany came from, because Tiffany also mentioned that James has basically known her since she was 13. And yeah, if all goes according to plan, we're gonna get into that in more nitty gritty in the upcoming chapter. So yeah, I'll give you that as a little bit of a taste of like both of these characters have had some shit since they were very young. And we might see how that brought them together though soon.
Very interesting, and I'm here to say the foreshadowing of it has been very well done. I got scared of the math because I was doing the mental math of age, and I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. Unless, so okay,
yeah. More often than not, you look at the math in my writing, and then you're like, unless, and then that ends up being what's happening. I'm sorry. I know I write a lot about like community and hope and all that, but yeah. There's also a lot of shit. It's the contrast. It's the contrast, baby.
I think I did. Whenever I read Soul Call, I always have very audible reactions to which anybody who's around me is like, what's going on? I'm like, don't ignore me. But I think after I did the mental math, I was like, oh no.
Staring off into the void.
Yeah, I think I was looking down at my keyboard like, oh no.
The anime aesthetic of everything going gray, the gloom lines hanging over.
Absolutely incarnate above me.
I've discovered that is a common reaction when I start to reveal like background details of things to people. And I'm always in it, so like sometimes I lose sense of scope of how bad things are that I make up, and then I just have that mirror of the other person reaction. I'm like, oh, whoops. Well, we're here now.
So to connect James and Tiffany here, their friendship obviously began from a very young age. Oh God.
More on that
later. Will we be finding out how they met? Potentially?
Yeah, that's something I definitely want to touch on in the next chapter. Like a lot of where they came from. and how they ended up here and what their dynamic is. It's kind of being foreshadowed a little bit in this chapter. We've seen both of them when they were younger. We've seen little flashbacks of both of them when they're younger, and we've also got that little moment where we have James appearing on Tiffany's doorstep in a bad way for reasons you can find out in the comic, and we have also Sia, our new character who shows up in the most recent chapter, kind of pushing on James in a way of like, hey, Tiffany cares about you. You realize this, right? Yeah, so that's all kind of laying the foundation for how we're going to soon start to dig into where these characters have come from and to set up where they will be going in the upcoming chapters.
Big fan and very excited to see that all happen. That being the case, obviously, Tiffany being very young when everything happened, when the fall occurred, as we had seen. Not going to ask too much about that, but I am going to say, how does she have her shit so put together?
Well, that's the secret. She doesn't. It's all a facade. She's obviously doing a bit better. I hesitate to say that. But, you know, she had an apartment in the district, and she had connections, and she generally seems like she has a good head on her shoulders. That came a lot with her just being really good with people, and going back to the whole idea of humanity being a neutral entity instead of one that you can call good or evil. That has two sides to it, in that she could also be manipulative. She could also, you know, be very self-centered in how she interacts with people, but in such a way that it helps her build those connections and build those bonds and gets where she wants to go. That's how she ended up in the district, essentially, is that she knew how to play the game with other people to get what she wanted. And that is like part of a big part of how she has ended up in the place she has with the resources she has, and the resources then kind of feed back into her being able to bolster her appearance of looking like she has her shit together. It's just her ability to work with people to get what she wants and where she wants. And I'm not necessarily saying that's entirely a selfish thing that she's always doing. Obviously, she wants to help people. She puts herself at risk to help people. And she you know, made very sure in the jailbreak arc that, you know, the other people she was getting involved were not going to end up falling in her stead. You know, they weren't going to get punished because of what she wanted to do. She's just very good with people, and that's how she's kind of ended up in that place that seems like she's way more put together, because it's allowed her to make connections and play to other people's interests in a way that it garners the resources that allows her to have these foundations, and then she can use those foundations to help people who aren't as good with people as she is. So that's essentially how she's gotten there, but she's still extremely damaged and has been through a lot of wild stuff, as everyone has. It's just that the fact that she's been able to play the game with people that has kind of put her in a position where she has the resources to extend them to other people. And I feel like that really serves to play into the appearance she has, as if she has everything together, because she's been able to build resources and has the flexibility to actually extend those to other people. But she's also obviously struggling with her own stuff, and she's not necessarily addressed all of that. So, yes.
Tiffany.
It's a little checkbox for everyone.
little checkbox of, oh, dude. Like I said, I'll be saying that a lot.
Don't doubt it.
So, obviously, Soul to Call, a horror comic, and I want to dive into a little bit about horror genre for you, and me included here. I know that we are both very big horror enthusiasts. Um, so, is horror in general like your favorite genre of storytelling?
For me, like personally, and what I like to write, yeah, absolutely. Pretty much everything I write has an element of horror or the supernatural. A big thing that I enjoy exploring in my writing is something that has been called squaring the circle, and that's not in terms of like the geometry math problem impossibility from the 17th century, but it's more about the idea of bringing the subconscious to the conscious, which is typically the idea of introspection, of looking at the subconscious and deeper parts of ourselves and kind of wrestling with them and trying to reconcile them to become a better person. And I find horror a really good way to do that, to pretty much take the weird, the wild, dark, and just yank it out of the subconscious and put it in a more literal sense, in a way that you can actually touch and interact with and feel and contend with. Take this internal fight that a lot of people, I believe, have with themselves, with their histories, with their childhoods, with whatever, with what they've been through, and just turn that into something outward. And horror allows us to take that subconscious part of ourselves, and put it on display, no matter how fucked up it is, and really just tackle it without having to be afraid of it having to fit into a genre that is maybe inclined to something more mild in terms of subject matter. I think that's one reason I really enjoy horror, is because it allows you to just kind of take the kid gloves off and really dive into just some of the really dark and troubling stuff that people go through, and just have it be seen. There's just something I feel almost therapeutic about seeing these really dark, terrifying things put out into the light, in ways that you actually can grapple with, or fail to grapple with. It depends on what the horror story is going for. So horror and supernatural tend to really go hand in hand with what I like to write, because I really love the idea of taking these internal battles and making them external into, giant flesh creatures that are trying to kill you or drain you of all your blood, or what have you. Psychological battles turning into flesh monsters that want to eat your face.
I gotta say, the being able to see things manifest and kind of like identify them for what they are, to then tackle them. Reaching through the mic to shake your hand on that. Same thought process over here. I mean, I've talked to you about how much I enjoy horror, and that is the little less stated part of it from me that is a big deal, and my appreciation of it. So nice to have somebody else who thought that.
Yeah, I feel like horror is a great vehicle to explore all kinds of, not only fears, but just human struggles that we go through, because there's a lot of stuff that wouldn't be defined as pretty that we have to, as human beings with our big old brains, we have to try and reconcile with, we have to try and cope with. And I just really like taking that and turning it into a monster or into an environment, and just giving it a space to explore and a space to fight it. And there's also that, this again, it depends on the horror story. Some horror stories are like, they're made to be doomed. They're made to take the characters to an inevitable, horrible end. And there's definitely merit in those. But I also like horror stories in which they take those fears and they manifest it into something that you can actually, tackle. It makes them almost less frightening when it's not just this weird psychological thing, but it's this thing right in front of you that you can fight and you can conquer. And that's a big part of Soul to Call, is that it's taking these horrible, scary things and showing like, hey, if you've got a support network, you can fight them. And it's just taking that concept and putting it out into something that's more easy to digest than something that is like more abstract. Again, there's merit in abstract storytelling and abstract art and all that as well. But for comics, for this particular instance, that's just a way I like to utilize it.
Can you talk about how you go about creating your monsters, please?
Yeah. So I love designing monsters. That's another reason that they're involved in Soul to Cause. I wanna make some fucked up monsters. Put it in there. Put it in the blender with everything else.
Yes.
So a lot of the monsters begin with kind of a concept of what I want them to do. So a couple examples is we have the hound, which eats people. It eats things. It eats. The hellhound. It eats. And then we've got something like the nightmare, which is also named for its activities, which is essentially it uses these little tendril things to bore under your skin and then pretty much absorb and make you relive your horrible traumas. So that's just a couple examples. Those are the first two you'll see in the comic of the kind of things I come up with initially for the monster. I figure out what kind of horrible thing is it going to do? What kind of horrible thing do I need it to do? And off the back of that, really the basis of a lot of my monster designs is suffering. I want it to look like it is not comfortable to exist in this body. I don't want the monsters to look scary in terms of like they have teeth and they're huge and they got these big claws and they can totally rip you to shreds or what have you. I want it to be a certain crisis of having a body. When you look upon these things are bloated, they're malformed, they've got their insides on their outside, there's bones out, and there's just as Murray just discovered there's something very human about all of them because they're based in this idea of the human body being twisted and becoming this uncomfortable experience. So a lot of the abominations are designed around the idea of what kind of body would suck to live in? Because it's not only the characters who are struggling, maybe the monsters aren't having a great time either. So they're not supposed to exist like this. That's one of my primary thoughts when I design these creatures is they don't come from another, an alien plane. I'll say that because earlier on I said aliens was one of my ideas. These aren't aliens. Yeah, something about the abominations has them manifesting in this way, and it's not right, not even for them. There's just something not right about their entire existence.
That's so interesting. And it's honestly, you are the first person that I have ever really heard of who has like designed monsters or done anything with horror design or what have you that has thought about the suffering of the monster rather than like the suffering that they can inflict. That's extremely what's the word that I'm looking for here? I guess unique. Definitely unique for sure.
Yeah, it's not something I see around a lot either. Yeah.
And one that really like launched at me, again looking through the codex part, was the bobblehead. And I think that absolutely gives a hell of a lot of credence to how you design in just a mere 2 sentences, where you describe the bobblehead as having a pus-filled, swollen head that leaks from its unblinking eyes.
That's a taste for anyone who's unfamiliar with the comic. Yeah.
Grotesque weeping over the eternal pain of its ribs breaking in its contorted chest.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you might notice in the comic it makes a clicking noise quite often. That's not coming from its mouth.
Oh. When when I had read that and then I saw the bobbleheads for the first time, I was like, I've done CPR. I know what that sound is.
Yeah, I imagine so. Yeah.
Oh God.
There's no sound design in comics, but it's something I'm like quietly very passionate about. So again, Topical video game. I'll be in on that sound design too.
Oh my lord.
Yeah, so a lot of the monster design comes down to just a bad time. I really want to express the monsters as some. I said it before. I want them to scare you because of how uncomfortable it looks for them to exist. And thus they can do horrible things to you as well, on top of that. But also just they become body horror just in their own right. You look at that and you start to identify the humanity in its shape. And who knows why they look kind of human shaped. That's a secret. But as a human being with your own flesh body, it just becomes uncomfortable because a lot of us can't help but look at that, and even if we try not to, think about what that must feel like to have your body shaped in that form, to exist in that kind of twisted shape. And that's where the fear and the inspiration for their designs really comes from, is just to make them the most uncomfortable motherfucker this side of the no man's land that you're gonna run into today.
And you have definitely succeeded. For me personally, I always get this reaction, which I think a couple of other people will agree with me. Like when you see somebody get injured, like, you know, a child. Well, so I was gonna say a terrible joke. If a child falls over, you laugh, but but like, you know, you see somebody get hit with something hard, or, you know, if you've ever seen like somebody's bone break, you almost feel like that phantom pain yourself.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I've seen some of these things in the comic. I'm like, why am I feeling like, why do I feel like my ribs feel weird? And how do I, no.
I'd rather not really think about that. Hate being aware of my body in this way.
Yeah. So you have manifested a phantom pain, at least in me, whenever I see certain things.
I'm sorry, but also that was the intent, so I can't be too sorry.
You succeeded very well.
Yeah, and I see him saying they also like that the monsters are reduced to base survival, like hunger. And yeah, there's also a reason for that I can't talk about. But there's so much lore behind the monsters, and part of me is like, I don't know if that's ever gonna come out, honestly, because, you know, they're monsters, and there's the fun of having them just remain a bit more ambiguous. But I know everything.
Right.
I'm just sitting here like, I know everything about this universe. I know why everything is happening.
You're like sitting on this stack of like phone books worth of everything.
Yeah.
Just sweat, just like, I know it all.
Yeah. Maybe someday he will too, but we'll see about that.
We'll see. Fun question to toss in here. What Soulcall monster do you think you could take in a fight?
Oh boy. I'm not very combat inclined, but I do have a knife, and that always surprises everyone.
Yeah.
I'm a very tiny person. Anyone who's met me can attest. Once Mim gave me a little push, I essentially went flying into the wall. So that should give you an idea of I'm probably not taking any of them on in a one-to-one kind of combat situation.
Okay.
But I do have a knife. So I feel like my best bet would possibly be either going after a nightmare with a surprise attack, like from behind. Because their weak point is they have like the scrawny little necks, and you basically, if you can sever that, then you sever their mobility. This is something that's hard to portray in comics all the time, but their heads don't necessarily stop functioning once they are severed from the rest of the body. They just stay in one place. So I feel like if I snuck up behind one and like had a sharp enough machete or something, I could get one of those in. I have a pretty good swing. I was once told in a self-defense class that I am ruthless, so
Yeah.
I'm like an angry chihuahua with a knife.
Oh, fuck yeah.
But I feel like I need the stealth because I'm not taking them on hand to hand. The other thing I might be able to take on is a leech, but with the Tiffany approach of having the amulet. Because obviously, no one's taking on a leech close combat at all without an amulet. But like, if you can get close to it and you can take out its little like sacks of lungs of blood on its back, you can take it out pretty easily. You just have to get the amulet first, which is a whole other kit and caboodle. But I don't know. I'm chronically ill and mentally ill. I feel like I could figure out an amulet. So I think my final statement here is, maybe if I came at it from behind with a knife, I could take out a couple.
Okay.
Not the hound, though. The hound is like brute force. No way. I need a gun for that one. Which I do know how to shoot a gun, so...
Hey, alright. You're set up. Which then leads me to my next fun question. If you were in no man's land and dealing with all this shit, what would be your weapon of choice to bring along if you only had to have one? And would the weapon have a name?
Good question. I feel like I've pigeonholed myself into the knife thing because I've always brought a knife everywhere. But if I really want to survive, I don't think the knife is gonna cut it. We'll delegate the knife to like a little keychain knife, so I still have something sharp for the utility of it all. But if I really wanted to survive, I think it would have to be either a pistol or some manner of rifle. I've obviously given James the AK-47 because it's like one of those rifles that's known for just being able to take some shit and keep shooting. That's kind of why he ended up with that. I'm small. I'm not sure I could handle a rifle for a very long time without my shoulder getting more fucked up than someone with a bit more meat to them. So... yeah, maybe a pistol. Maybe I could handle a pistol of some sort. I feel like that would be my best bet because I'm gonna need the distance. The knife does not give me the distance, and I'm gonna need it because otherwise, first like bandit I run into is gonna give me a friendly shove as like a preliminary intimidation tactic, and I'm gonna go through a window. So
to the moon.
Yeah. So long, space cowboy.
I can't throw a Cowboy Bebop reference at me like that.
I've also got Full Metal Alchemist ones if you need them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh god. So, would this weapon have a name? Would you name it?
Yeah, right. A name. You know, I'm gonna go with the first thing that came to mind, which is Leon Kennedy.
Yes!
We're really in it now, Leon, I say as I cradle my pistol. Give me strength. We're both just fucked up little guys trying to survive the worst of circumstances.
Oh, that's great. Oh, I love it.
Leroy Jenkins, but it's Leon Kennedy as I bust onto the scene and shoot something.
Oh, I love this image so much.
Little 5 foot, like 5'5", busted pistol.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Thank you. Let's not go into a coughing fit, great.
You're allowed.
Thank you.
You may have a couple minutes to cough.
Thank you
I
so
will bestow this upon you.
Thank you, you're a benevolent overlord.
Only sometimes, very occasionally. You've caught me on a good day, evidently.
Alright, I'm good. I'll live. Pulling away from the monsters and talking about something that's a little bit further back of what we've talked about. but it is something that I picked up on and that I figured would be a good part for the horror segment here. I did digging again, and during your 7-year anniversary Q&A,
Uh-huh.
you talked about how you wanted a quote-unquote quiet apocalypse to be the cause of the post-apocalyptic landscape. Can you expand
Yes.
on what you meant by that and why you wanted it to be of that particular variety?
Yeah, so I want to call up a video game specifically in this particular instance because it's what really inspired me to want to take this approach with the apocalypse, and it's a very, very unknown video game. It was a little Wii title called Farewell Ruins of the Moon. And if you look at that game, you're gonna see like some of the DNA of Soul Calling. I didn't bring it up initially because it was a quiet apocalypse, more of a quiet element that really just it less inspired it and more like awakened in me like, oh, I've liked this for a long time, and seeing someone else do this makes me want to do it too. If you look at any screenshots of that game, you're going to see a post-apocalypse, and you're going to see ghosts infesting that apocalypse, and you're going to see a strange aurora borealis in the sky. And the cause of that apocalypse, I won't give it away because I do think that game, despite being kind of clunky to play, has a worthwhile story. But it had a quiet apocalypse, and the main monsters you fight in this game are ghosts, are just the spirits of people who slowly and quietly faded away in this world. And it became apparent to me when I was playing this game that there was a certain there was fertile ground for exploration of a lot of introspection and a lot of just exploring humanity and the experience of isolation and being alone, and focusing on that a lot more than like the sky is falling and we've went through this horrible process of everyone dying in all these unique ways, and there were bombs, and it was like this really horrible apocalypse, and now we're here. I wanted the focus for the characters to be less on that the apocalypse happened and more the aftermath and how they're dealing with a world that it has been so fundamentally changed. And the ghosts, in Soltikal's case, a little more metaphorical, that stay behind after that. And so that's why I decided to go with the idea that the majority of people who died in the fall, it was pretty much just a snap. There were some corpses left behind. It wasn't just a disappearing like some other snaps in pop culture, but just a bunch of people. Suddenly they were gone. They were, you could say they were raptured. That's not what happened, but like that's one of the other kind of pop culture ideas of an apocalypse, is just a whole swath of people are just gone. And what do we do about that instead of why are they gone and how did that happen? It's less about we lost this world in this horrible calamity, and more we are people trying to continue on after suddenly, just quietly, without much fanfare, our world has completely changed, and we have to focus on a more, I guess, low-key version of contending with that. It's less intense, it's less high octane than some other apocalypses that are involved in like the big downfall, like the opening scene of The Last of Us, for example, where we follow Joel as he goes through the first days of the apocalypse and this whole thing going down. I wanted a very different experience for the characters. I wanted them to essentially, on the first days of the fall, they step out into this world and it's just a lot quieter. There's so much silence, and slowly the monsters start to come out of the fog. They aren't the immediate threat. It's just this very quiet, suddenly the world is different, suddenly the world has changed, and we have to not only contend with that this has happened, but contend with who we were before and who we are carrying into this world. And there's not this big tragedy that that kind of sections that off It's just suddenly we have sunk into this melancholic place, and we have to take who we were and who we will be into it without this very evident dividing line of trauma. We just remain the people we are. We're just in a very different world now.
That is wonderfully eerie, and I see why you went for it. Truly, that's really cool. And what a game to pull out of the woodworks too, as an example. I definitely have never even heard of that either. I will be looking up screenshots later. I hope you understand. Like,
it's a very gorgeous game. I feel like it's just worth looking at the aesthetic. You're absolutely going to see where topical comes from aesthetically through some screenshots of that game. It was a game that really didn't focus a lot on the post-apocalyptic part so much as the character's journey through it, and that was very inspiring to me as well, because it became a lot about the characters in isolation and finding community, and just a very introspective journey through a very haunted and oftentimes creepy but also beautiful wasteland. So if you pull up Farewell Ruins of the Moon, you're going to see DNA in there that I seldom talk about, but is a big part of it.
Rock on. Well, I'll definitely look at it, and I wonder if I can find a copy of it somewhere.
I don't know. Maybe you can. I don't know. We can emulate it. Maybe.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a very old Wii game, so that's kind of your only choice at this point. And so.
Yeah, probably. No, I'll figure something out. Now I'm too curious. I have to.
It's almost like a very rough survival horror story with a lot of melancholy to it. It's a very melancholic game. Yeah, but that is what inspired the Quiet Apocalypse, because it inspired more melancholy than I don't know, Mad Max Fury Road might in its apocalypse, to put a very contrasting example.
Yeah.
The way the world ended, quote unquote. I feel like that plays as much into the tone of the rest of the story as where it has ended up.
That's awesome. We love an abandoned aesthetic.
Yes, absolutely. Love that. That was one of my foundational things. It's like, I love abandoned shit. We're gonna make this an abandoned world.
And obviously, I'm a huge fan of it, and as we had mentioned before, much more preferred, in opinion, at least over here, than just the destruction of, nuclear landscape or, war or, whatever else. Which is going to segue into how, when things are left behind, how they are retaken, or they have a lot more life to them than people may understand or know or recall, and that is a beauty of an abandoned aesthetic and abandoned locations.
Absolutely. So
when you were doing all of your research and searching for inspiration for the environment and what have you, you played, like you said, you played Last of Us, you played many games for that. Did you go out there and go to abandoned environments to use as references? Did you personally go to any place?
I do like to walk around and go to areas that are less manicured. I live in a very urban kind of area, so it's a bit harder to find those kind of locations. But whenever I find little nuggets of them, I do really like to spend time with them. I sometimes take pictures, especially when I was first starting out, of just how the overgrowth starts to entrap the original structure that's there. I also live in a very rainy place, so I almost don't even have to go very far to see how things get broken down very quickly by the elements. There's a lot of structures that just are not even all that old, but because it's very rainy and very damp, very cold, they just start to fall apart much quicker than other places might see them, develop. So it's very it's hard and it's easy to find locations like that, but I definitely love to look up close and personal at those kind of locations and just not only see them visually and see how destroyed but full of life they are, but also to exist in that space. I find it very calming. I like to be alone in certain ways. Like I'm not a big fan of crowds, and just something about being alone in a place with history it's very soothing to me, and that was also something that drew me to making it the basis for my comic. So yeah, I do like to go out and see those places and just experience in them myself, the soundscape, the foliage, just all of that. Yeah, so I enjoy looking at pictures, I enjoy drawing them, and yeah, I enjoy exploring them as well when I get the opportunity. It's rare, but whenever I can find a place like that, I just like to stay in it a little while and absorb the atmosphere and think about what might have been there before me.
And you know that I know that I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love your stories. They're so fun.
I love sharing them with you. And hugely something to be said as somebody else who has done that and who has done it on a very frequent basis. The isolation is coming from somebody else who also likes to be by himself. The isolation in those particular places feels different. It's different than if you're like sitting in your own room, or if you're sitting, wherever you live, like in a park or whatever, by yourself, because you're surrounded by so many activities, you're surrounded by so many people. When you're in those places and you're sitting and listening to the nature that's around you, listening to, this is going to sound kind of mystical, but listening to the memories of those places.
I totally get you. Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah. I like writing supernatural, subconscious, like psychological shit. You're in the right place.
Yes. But yeah, it's different, and it definitely gives a different, a different space to exist, and one that I found extraordinarily therapeutic. So much so that I spent days of my life in an abandoned town.
Yeah, which I think is awesome.
Thank you. And for those who are around here, who may not fully know where I'm coming from with all this, I had grown up near an abandoned town and was there very often. I explored a lot, and that is where my draw towards Soultacall really stemmed from, seeing the abandoned places and seeing how natural and lively it looked, though it not having many people and all these horrible things. And I'm pretty sure like the first conversation that we ever had, like voice to voice, I brought that up to you as like one big thing that I loved, and that was like the first few pages that I had read of Soultacall at the time as well.
Yeah, and I was really happy to hear that, because that was definitely something I was hoping to capture with the comic, was just almost the majesty of abandoned places. And I feel like that's a little harder to do in a comic medium, like maybe in a movie or, again, a game, when you can actually like really get into the environment. That's you might be able to portray it a bit easier than a comic. So I'm glad that it was portrayed through the comic well also, as that was definitely a goal. I really just wanted to 100% bring out the beauty of abandoned places.
And you did an excellent job. Again,
this
is coming from the person who has lived, experienced so much of it. I was just looking at it and thinking, man, this looks like home.
Oh, wow. That's a ringing endorsement. Yeah. And when I'm designing locations and all kinds of areas that the characters explore in the comic, I definitely like to think of the history of that place, which I think is a big important element of making an abandoned location. I was thinking about what was it before it was abandoned and who has been through here either before it was abandoned or since it has been abandoned. And a lot of the locations, I have little mental stories about what was going on here before our characters just kind of bust through it. Um, and you never really find out what those stories are, but I have them in mind when I'm designing the room, like what was going on here before the characters ended up here, and that can bleed out in some of the like, graffiti or things I write on the walls. And that's where that sense of stem from, is just this idea of like, who was here, what were they doing, what were they thinking and experiencing when they were in this space. Yeah, that's very, very easy to miss, but it's something I think about.
I'm so glad you brought that up. That was going to be something else that I brought up in here, because like I spend so much time in each cell looking at the graffiti and looking at what's around, because I had picked up on like this is just telling the story of what has happened here, or what's even might potentially happen in the future or what have you. And like I going through all the rooms with the characters and seeing, you know, like what was written on the wall, whether it was a warning or whether it was a, you know, like names on a wall that have been checked off or like crossed out, or just a simple phrase of, you know, something haunting. I'm like, bad shit happened here 9 times out of 10, but every so often there's like this little sliver of something else that I'm like, oh, neat.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that is a great representation of just what I try to do with the comic in general, is really just play with that contrast, and that manifests in the locations as well.
Absolutely. And real world too. That has that's
this is inspired by seeing real places and going through thousands of photos of abandoned graffiti in abandoned places, and just getting inspiration from all of that. Yeah. Very real.
So with all of these references and inspirations coming from real world places, are there certain locations in the comic that are pretty well modeled after specific buildings, places, or so on in the real world?
I started out with the the idea that they would be, and then just kind of it became a melting pot of this is vaguely Canada, and I'm gonna do what I want with it, because I ended up spending so much time trying to research locations and trying to make them fit into what I wanted to do in the comic, and that just became boring to me. So I was like, this is semi-fantasy, it's an apocalypse, I'm just gonna kind of quilt together what works. So nothing is specifically designed after an exact location, but you know, I'm Canadian, grew up in Canada, very familiar with the landscape, so it is based generally off Canada, but I keep in mind where the characters are supposed to kind of be on the continent. So I'll do research for things like what's supposed to grow here or what doesn't grow here. That's been a big part of what I've been reading up about with the introduction of Sia, who dabbles in a lot of herbs and other such things, plants, plant medicine, and then things of that nature. So I took into account like what's around here, what could she pick, and what is she sourced from other places. So I keep that in mind when I'm writing, but it devolved essentially into this is vaguely Canada. I'm just gonna bring up locations that I think are fun, and I don't necessarily need them to be accurate to the real world.
You made me so happy here for a moment, bringing up the specific plants. I have too much of a green thumb. I garden a lot. I grow a lot of my own herbs and what have you, and hearing that you did the research for like what could grow in like this area ish, That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Thank you. It was also something that came to mind when I was doing one of the more recent sequences where they cook. Spoilers. They have a little dinner party, and I spent some time, like, I had an original idea of what they were gonna make, and then like I did some research. Like, there's no way they're gonna have access to most of this that would make up this meal. I have to trash the whole thing and come up with something else. But I'm dedicated to at least make it some semblance of realistic in terms of what the characters have access to. So we went through a lot of reading about camping, cooking while you're camping, and not having access to certain things, and what you do instead. So again, this is something that's just like, here's food now in the comic, but in the background, I like spent a week trying to rework the menu. Wait a minute, none of this makes sense at all.
I promise you, it doesn't go unnoticed. I promise. Yes. I just smacked my mic in happiness.
Yay.
Now, I do have a couple questions here that are specifically going to be geared just for you, not necessarily related to Soul to Call as the lore, what have you, but for you specifically. And the first one comes from McWigglestick again, asking, did you ever feel like stopping Soul to Call? If so, thank you for continuing.
Yeah, and there's definitely been points where I think it's natural when you've worked on something for so long. It's like a relationship, right? There will be times when maybe things aren't going as great as they could be, or there's other factors in your life that are impacting your ability to nurture that relationship, and it's having an impact on your feelings. And maybe that's not how you would feel about it in different circumstances, but because of everything going on around you, it's kind of interrupted how you would generally feel. And I've definitely been there. It's definitely like the longer it goes on, there's times where it's like I just want to put it all down and then go and do something else or focus on something else, and I'm tired. So there's definitely been times where I feel that way about it. But again, this is a story that I've kind of had in me since I was very, very young. I've had these characters with me for a very long time, and I feel like even if I did stop Soul to Call, that would only be a temporary kind of thing. I feel like I would come back to it because they're so ingrained in me, the story of the characters, that I mentioned this earlier, I would feel remiss to not give their story some sort of conclusion. So that kind of drives me even when I'm maybe not feeling so in love with the comic. It's like I want to give them a proper story. Essentially, I want to have all the stuff that I've laid out and I've thought about and I've prepared, given a respectful conclusion. And I wouldn't call it a sunk cost fallacy because it's not like, well, I put all this effort in, so I have to finish. It's more of a respect for what I've been making, and I don't want to just cut it off at the knees, because I know I would feel sad about that in the long run. And I know there's a lot of people that really enjoy the comic, and I want to give them the satisfaction of something, even if there's times when I feel like I just want to stop forever. It's usually just like there's something else going on right now that is tiring you out, and you don't actually want to put the comic down forever. You just need to just give yourself a little bit of gaming time, and you'll feel better. Here, play on your PlayStation for a few hours, you'll feel better. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes I do, but there's like this foundational love for it that's there that just makes me want to see it through. So I'll figure something out regardless of how things go, because I just really want those characters to get their conclusions.
It is very appreciated from all ends. I can guarantee that it continues on. And as a continuation, boy, is it important to take that step back sometimes. You know, when you're feeling I guess the slog would be the adjective for that. But I mean, hell, I know for damn sure in DMing world, for D&D and any other tabletop stuff, when writing a story or figuring things out, it'll be like, all right, yep, fuck this, but then realizing, no, hold on, just I don't know, go do something else, man.
Yeah, just take a breath, step away, go for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely important to pace yourself when you're working on long-term projects, and definitely important to find other things to do with your brain and your time. Don't just focus on it, or else you're absolutely going to risk burnout, which is
100%.
something nobody wants, especially when it's like a project you actually really care about. Nobody wants to have burnout around a story that you love. It's just there's something else going on, or you just don't have a lot of energy for whatever reason, and then it ends up bleeding into your work. So yeah, super important to every creator out there. I think we can both say, like, make sure to take care of yourself.
Please
do not put your whole heart and soul and bones into a project until you have nothing left for yourself. You need that. You need your body is the best instrument you have to create your works. Please take care of it.
Please take care. I am reaching through my computer to all of you and grabbing you by the face and smushing you. Stop. Take care of yourself, please.
Self-care. Shaking you by the face.
Yeah. We'll pick you up and toss you around and take care of yourself, goddammit.
Begging you.
Please. Sticking with the creative side of these questions for now. Anonymous, somebody who's does not want to be named, is asking, what pulled you to drawing, and did you go to university for it?
Yeah, I've pretty much been drawing as long as I can remember. It's just one of those things where, like, little baby Rommie was given a pencil and a piece of paper, and the rest is history. Oh. I was just always compelled to try and artistically express myself through the medium of, like, pencil and paper. I was never really drawn to paints. It was only until I started getting into digital where I started to work with color more. But yeah, I just always like to draw. It's hard to really answer the question when something pulled me to start drawing, because it's just kind of always been there. It's just been a facet of my personality forever. And I didn't end up going to a university for it. I actually went to post-secondary for graphic design, which is similar, but not quite drawing, not quite like fine arts. So it was a similar discipline, and so that it took my inclinations towards creativity and making things visually, and aimed that more towards designing things like, packaging, magazines, what have you, that kind of thing. That ended up feeding into making comics as well, honestly, because there are certain elements of graphic design that have crossover with comics. There's like the certain kind of visual storytelling that comes through with graphic design. A lot of graphic design is about drawing, a person's eye through a design in a certain way, which is another thing that you utilize in comics because you want the reader to follow along through each panel. So there's a lot of crossover there, but I never really went to school or got any official training for drawing or design or writing or anything. This is all just like a pure grit and my desire to draw things and tell a story. And it's like, I'm gonna do this. I might not have all the resources for a top tier education or whatever, but I'm gonna figure it out anyway.
Oh yeah. With my very minimal artistic career, shall we say, the furthest that I ever went with, excuse me, with drawing or any artistic endeavor was in college. As a side gig of a job, I designed tattoos for people.
Well, that's cool.
Thank you. That was when I was better at drawing and when I was doing it a lot more. Obviously,
enough.
didn't do college for art, drawing, or anything proper like that. I was a sociology, cultural anthropology, and archaeology thing.
Some conglomeration of those.
Some crazy thing that I decided to do. But I found, at least for me, like you had said, it was about grit and figuring things out. It was very early on for me about quantity, and then came quality. Of do it, keep doing it, look at comparisons, and comparing art seemed to also really help me. I don't know why that did, but making like comparisons of what I was doing to somebody else's was huge. But then
makes sense.
as things progressed, it was like, okay, here's some quality now, suddenly.
Yeah.
I figured it out. How?
Figured out the method.
Yeah.
Somehow. This has happened.
Yeah. That's my experience, to the point of you saying, grit.
Yeah. Sometimes you just sit down with yourself and you figure it out because you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That can be said with a lot of just creative endeavors as well. I mean, like,
yeah.
me in writing too, which I am way too deep in, was again a lot of that quantity then quality suddenly.
Yeah.
And it was just, I want to do this. I want to figure this out more.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot about getting through those rough patches in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
When you're just you just have to make more and more things to start to work out kind of the problem areas and the kinks of the whatever you're doing. And the more you do that, the quicker you can start to get through all of that and actually start producing things that you consider quality. Yeah. So yeah, that absolutely makes sense to me. That it just became quantity first and quality after, because that's your learning process. That was pretty much my learning process too. It still is. I still just make comics and hope it works half the time. That's what it feels like. So yeah, totally get it.
Moral of the story, everybody: don't give up at the hurdles.
Yeah. Something I would tell people who were starting into comics is like, the first page you draw of any project is going to be the hardest. You're going to want to quit. Every single comic I've started, like from the beginning, before I set it on its roll, has been like, first page, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this at all. But yeah, just I promise it. I don't even want to even say it gets easier, but you get used to it, and it becomes a better experience after you get through the I don't know what I'm doing and this sucks kind of phase of what you're making.
Oh, god damn it. God damn it. My body.
Well, it's back at it again.
Back at it again, hating me. Now, one of the final questions that I had coming from myself, you are a part of a webcomic collective called Spider Forest. What is that all about, exactly?
Yeah, so Spider Forest, there's a couple like kind of webcomic collectives out there. Hiveworks is another one that comes to mind. And it's kind of, if anyone is familiar with the olden days of the internet, what a web ring is. It's the whole idea of having a bunch of different sites kind of strung together and advertising each other. So you essentially, the idea is you get more eyes on all of these sites, because if someone is on this site and sees that, oh, they're part of this web ring, then you go check out the other sites that they're involved in. So the Spider Forest Webcomic Collective is a collective of webcomic artists who've all come together to support each other, through resources, critique, conversation, just shooting the shit, and discussing creation of webcomics and anything else that comes along. And we all support each other by having, obviously, if you look on my site, I have the various like little banners to other comics in the collective, so we advertise each other's comics. There's often little events within the community where we make either zines or we make anthologies, and everyone contributes like a little like 10 to 20 page comic, and we put them all together under one theme, and we print books. I've tabled at cons with other Spider Forest members, so we support each other through that way as well. And it's just that webcomic creation can be such an isolating experience. It's really good to have that community of like-minded people who kind of know what you're going through, to call back to earlier, kind of know what it feels like to be working on the same project for years and years, slowly, and having those moments of I don't know if I really want to make this anymore, and just having other people who really understand where you're coming from, who can share resources. And in an internet where it's getting harder and harder to connect with people, even in the webcomic community, with webtoons and stuff, making people a lot more isolated from each other, I find the Spider Forest webcomic collective to be just one of the most welcoming and just beneficial little webcomic relationships I've ever had. And I saw them advertised around when I was first starting out, and I was like, I like the comics. I like the cut of your jib, Spider Forest. I like the comics that you advertise. I'm gonna try and apply and see if I can become part of the inner circle. And the rest is history. Yeah, so it's a really cool crew, and they're also purple, so so I can support that.
Awesome, that's great. I had never heard about like a webcomic collective, or let alone like a collective like that before.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I would say it's terribly common, but yeah.
It was very interesting to see. I went looking at like Spider Force a little bit and seeing like all the other webcomics there. I'm like, oh god, I gotta.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, if I can shout out one of my favorites is Broken. If you read one comic to start you out on the ginormous roster that we currently have, really like Broken. It shares a lot of themes with Soul of the Call. I think anyone who likes Soul of the Call will dig Broken as well. Also Cast Off. Cast Off is less horror than Broken is. It's more just found family fantasy, but also has a blonde that likes destroying things. So, and a guy, a boy with glowy eyes that cause problems. So those are like the two comics I would recommend off the top of my head from Spider Forest: Broken and Cast Off.
Love it. All right, I will definitely be checking those out. But as far as questions that I've formulated here for you, I think that's all that I have. So
Yay,
if you have
we made it through.
Yeah. If you're willing and we have some time, there are a few things that has been put to the forums, and if you want to go back and talk about anything a little bit further, we can absolutely do that.
Yeah, I'm game. We can have a look at those extra questions for sure.
Cool. All right, let's see what we got here. Oh, I see a Mim one.
Hi, Mim.
Hi, Mim. Mim asks, where do Gray and Rom see themselves in the Soul to Call universe? Oh god, besides dead?
I mean, the most baseline answer is I am chronically ill. I don't know realistically how long I could last in a real post-apocalypse situation, but let's say I can. We did touch on that. I got Leanne Kennedy, my little pistol, and I'm doing my best.
Oh boy, I haven't thought about this.
Yeah, where would you go though? I'd be super curious.
Oh,
I feel like I'd be a bloodmancer. I'm a diabetic, so I'm already like I grew up bleeding.
Well, add that to your list of the bloodmancy part.
Yeah, I'd probably like end up as a bloodmancer who's like, well, I got nothing else going for me, but I can. It would be my own blood to be clear.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'd figure that out probably by accident.
Whoops, a little bit of blood magic here.
Yeah, because when I've worked in retail environments, it was always like, if you get blood on anything, we're gonna have to throw it out because it's a biohazard. And me with my hands that spontaneously bleed because I grew up poking holes in them for medical reasons. I'm like,
Oops.
So that would be me. I would also just be a biohazard of the no man's land insofar as I would accidentally discover bloodmancy. Because I bleed on everything I love. Mim can also attest to this. I've bled on them. Not on purpose, but it has happened. Well, I've been asleep, so...
Whoops.
Yep.
Oh boy, where would I be? I know that there are definitely a few people in my life that are like, "You'd be fine, shut the fuck up," and then a few others that are like, "Be honest."
We've established you're a little bit James core, so
yeah.
So by that metric, you end up taking care of 2 kids.
You know what's really funny that you say that? I don't have kids in real life, but there are 2 people in my life that I treat as my children.
There you go.
my basically sister I treat more as a child, honestly. And one of my buddies that I went to college with, he's one of the sweetest men on this entire planet. I love him to death. And one day he said to me, and I will tear up even now, he said to me, "You are more of a father to me than my actual one." I was like, oh!
Oh, damn. Yeah, absolutely the reaction. Oh, that even has like my heart hurting.
It hurts, and I love him. So I do already have 2 kids, basically.
Well then. Maybe you are the James of this equation.
I think though, if we're looking at the math of it, I think I would be okay. Like, at least for the beginning. If I didn't drop dead during the fall.
Yeah, this is all with the understanding that didn't happen because that kind of cuts the story short.
Yeah. I do have medical training to begin with. You know, did all that growing up with like EMT, all that jazz. And given my job, for those who don't know, I work as a security and bodyguard for the U.S. government. So that has given me training.
I can imagine.
Excuse me. And my dad was always like a big proprietor of, you know, just be ready for anything. You know, it should, to the best of your ability, but not going overboard. Like, don't be building bunkers.
Yeah.
But you know, like, be prepared. You know, have a bug out bag, have all these things, because he grew up in that scenario with his family. So actually, just to talk a little bit of how that all spawned. My mama and my opa, they you know, grew up in Europe. My opa is Ukrainian, and my mama was Bavarian. They survived a lot, and my grandfather, my opa, was also a military spy.
Oh. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So he raised his kids to be, you know, ready for a lot of the worst. And so then that translated to my father, who then translated it to me. In a much more diluted version, I want to say, for sure. But I would think with my training and like just me like having a bug out bag and like also being taught like, here's how you do survivalist things, kiddo. I think I'd be okay.
Yeah, I think you would be too. Like, everything I've known about you is like, yeah, I feel like you'd manage. I feel like you could manage.
Thank you. That's a huge compliment. Yay. Mental okayness with everything.
That can be the same can be said for everyone we've talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's debatable and largely an ongoing project.
Yeah, that is a we cross that bridge when we get there, and that's if it's not burned down.
Yeah, I'm putting a rain check for dealing with the psychological fallout of the situation.
Yep. Gee whiz. Another question, an anonymous question. Is there any abandoned location in the world that you would like to experience yourself?
I would never go there because I'm too paranoid about radiation. But the first thing that comes to mind is Chernobyl, that area.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a common one, but I feel like it's so unique in its abandonment that I just feel like it'd be such a fascinating place to see firsthand. It's a horrible, horrible tragedy, but there's so much. It's the closest thing I feel like one can get to the idea that we've kind of talked about of the apocalypse. And almost a quiet apocalypse because so many people just had to pick up and leave. Yeah. So there's so much there. There's so much history that was just dropped and left there without any fanfare. And yeah, terrible thing that happened. But I just feel like it'd be a very fascinating place to visit because of that history, and because it has just so much life that was just left there. There's so much to see and so many stories that were just abandoned in place. Mm-hmm. And now it's been taken over by nature, and there's wild dogs running around, and it would be something that I think would be a very unique experience to actually go in and see for yourself, if not harrowing to just know kind of what happens there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like the first thing that comes to mind, because it's a whole like city essentially too, which is also incredibly unique. It's not often that you just see entire places, end to end, that are just entirely abandoned in that way.
Yeah. Absolutely. The only example that I have, which I've talked to you ad nauseum about, is Walpack, the town that I grew up near, where from end to end everybody left.
Yeah.
Which
it's so different when it's like, it's not just a building. It's not just, this is a building that among an urban environment that has been abandoned, which has its own unique silence to it. But when it's a whole area, there's just such a vibe to it, that's so different from just one isolated location.
Yeah, it's freakily and fascinatingly different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Spooky, but hey, that's my vibe.
Yeah, I like the spooks.
Yeah. I've brought people there before. Excuse me. And I made one mistake of bringing certain people there at night. They hated that. Meanwhile, I'm just like, doot, 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 yep, this is normal. Yeah, and they're like, are you fine? What's going on here? I'm like, don't worry, it's fine. I know this place like the back of my hand. It's okay.
This is your major malfunction, good sir. Why are we here in the dead of night? This dead-ass town.
It was the funniest thing, though. I have the stupidest story. One of the places that I frequented, and that whenever I go to like visit my old hometown, I'll go to this one specific place there, and I brought these particular individuals there at night, and I know this, but ever since I was going there was this collection of turkey vultures that that lived there, and like in the roof and what have you. And I don't know if you've like seen a turkey vulture like up close.
Just in pictures.
They're big. And they got big old wingspans. And they're not typically nocturnal to my recollection, but went there. There was one outside, and you just hear like the ruffling of the feathers as it put its wingspan out, and just in dim light seeing that that giant wingspan, probably as long as me, was just Ooh! Everybody
Yeah.
was freaking the fuck out.
That's what makes you believe that Mothman was just like an owl, right? Like when
Yeah.
you see something like that, you're like, yeah, I see how someone could mistake that for a supernatural bringer of doom.
Totally and completely, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds terrifying. You know, when you hear the word turkey, usually the associated words you don't think of are like terrifying, harrowing, you know, shit your pants kind of scenarios. But I can see how that would happen in this particular instance.
Mm-hmm. I see Mim Googling it for the first time. Yep.
Yeah.
Turkey vultures. They are something else.
They're unique little birds. Not so little.
They are something. Bad.
That's it.
Oh boy. So also just to talk about Chernobyl for a second, my family history may be wrong here, but I think my Ukrainian family was near Chernobyl when it went up.
Oh, damn.
And then they left, obviously, elsewhere. I don't remember. I'm gonna have to ask my dad. But yeah, just random tidbit, random fun fact for no reason. But hey.
It's a small world of radioactive tragedy.
Yeah. Excuse me. Let's see. What other questions do we have here that have popped up? We have. Hold on. It's loading for me. Somebody has just added in more. Mert has. If you haven't answered this yet, what abominations are y'all kinning? Oh boy. Time to. Oh boy, let me look.
Yeah. What do we have to choose from?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like for me, I have to say the leech because I cannot deny that I do have a certain obsession with blood, which has, I think, stemmed from the fact that since I was in the single digits of my existence, I've been bleeding myself for medical reasons multiple times a day. I feel like it's hard to come out of that and not have a certain fascination with blood. So there's that. And there's also the fact that I designed that monster, and then this came up in chat earlier. I designed this monster to fuck with Mim.
Yeah.
And basically, my metric was if this freaks out Mim, then I've achieved my goal with this monster. So I feel like those two aspects. That is baseline obsessed with blood insofar as it will take all the blood out of your body if you go close enough to it, and also was designed to unsettle Mim specifically, who is my partner. I feel like I have to kin the leech.
Yeah, all right, I get it. Oh boy, which one for me? I don't know, homie. I like. Listen, the bobblehead I think is my favorite monster personally, but I don't think I kin that. I think if anything, I'm Shadow. I think simply because God, I exist only in the dark.
I am the darkness. I am the night.
To it. Yeah, I think so. For no other reason, honestly.
I mean, if you want to turn it on its head a little bit, you could consider Shadow's very loyal.
Oh boy, yeah.
No, I mean,
I'm your friend
they're
now.
not gonna give you up without a fight.
You're my best friend.
Forever.
He could also be a Strider because he strikes me as the sort to like oopsie daisy slice you in half.
That's fair.
You know,
Strider is on the roster. I'm just going on my little walk, and oops, I've had an accident. Call the ambulance, but not for me.
Oops, my bad. Yeah, man. I have a reverb button for my mic. That was a good question, Mert. Thank you.
Excellent.
See, another one from Mert that's really interesting. I didn't think of that. How were animals affected by the fall?
Now that is interesting, isn't it? Because not very much.
Huh?
And yeah, like animals were impacted by the fall in the same way that you'd expect animals to be impacted by the sudden disappearance of a lot of humanity. So, there's certain elements of like, not to get really sad about, but, a lot of pets would have a hard time transitioning in that front. So there's that. You're probably going to find lots of wild, previously domesticated dog communities, and lots of cat colonies now that were once house cats for those who made it. So there's that, and there's like certain animals that are ingrained in urban societies who might get most of their food from dumpster diving, like a raccoon or something. And raccoons can still forage, but they would be affected a little bit in the sense that the infrastructure of human society is kind of broken down. So there's that aspect. But in terms of the fall, they were not impacted in the same way, and that continues because abominations don't attack animals. They don't attack animals, they don't eat them, they don't hurt them. Animals are generally pretty okay in terms of the fall.
I have so many questions.
Yep. And I have answers, but I can't talk about that.
I'll be the patient man and wait.
Yeah, but that's one reason horses are also like the horse does not get eaten by the monster and never will get eaten by the monster in this story because the monsters don't care about the horse. They don't care about animals.
I thought the horse was just a lucky bastard. I generally was just like, hey, good for you, man.
Lucky bastard insofar as like the cult didn't do something to kill it before it got away. But yeah, it's just kind of chilling and showing up and like, hey, what's everybody yelling about?
What's going on, man? Oh, crap.
So like in terms of resources and infrastructure, animals are obviously affected by that. But in the same way that the foliage of nature kind of is reclaiming the environment, we see that a lot. We would see that a lot in the animals too, and how they're also pretty much reclaiming a lot of this space in the best way they can, depending on where they're at.
Mert, thank you.
more brain worms have been released.
So many wiggly thoughts. I'll be thinking about this all night at work.
I'm glad. One of my favorite things is to see people theory crafting either about the characters or the story. That's always super duper rewarding.
And because we are getting close to the time where I also will have to start getting myself ready and make lunch for myself. One last thing. This comes from Mim. Not a question, but a statement. Congratulations, Rom, on a decade of Soul to Call, and thank you again and again for the incredible body of work. And thank you, Gray, for being such a fantastic host and showcasing this special story and the awesome person behind it. Excellent stream. Thanks, Mim.
Thank you, Mim. It's really sweet. Yeah, absolutely have to agree. It's been great sitting here and chilling and talking about the Soul to Call and everything surrounding it with you, Gray. I'm really happy you invited me on today.
Oh, thanks, Rom. It's been my absolute goddamn pleasure. I'm so happy that we could do this. I look forward to seeing what more is to come and figuring it all out.
Yeah, I'm dropping hints.
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down. I'll put it in my pocket.
Excellent. Yeah, it's really awesome to find a kindred spirit, so to speak, in terms of like horror. Another one, another one for my collection.
Yes.
Who has similar inclinations towards some of these themes that I do. It's really awesome, and it's great to get to discuss it.
I'm very happy to give you this space here to talk about it all you want, and will most definitely, I'm here to tell you, when Soul Call inevitably has to come to an end, I'm inviting you back on for this.
Nice. All right.
I will be keeping notes.
Yeah, and we can just start talking about all the little nitty-gritty things. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes.
I'll look forward to it.
Right on. And thank you everybody who was here for this stream. I really appreciate it. Very, very, very fucking much. Excuse me.
Yeah. Same here. Thank you so much for showing up, hanging out with us.
And again, sorry everybody that I wasn't able to get to all of your questions, but to those who did submit, thank you so goddamn much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for showing interest and showing up and letting me ramble so many different directions.
Very happy to. But everybody, please take a look at all of the links connected to Rommie, their Patreon, their commissions page. Of course, for God's sake, Soul Call, I will shake you. Just take a look at everything that they have to offer, and look forward to seeing them in future episodes of Puzzle Box, along with Mim, who's here. And I see that Sarah also sends their love, and also Sarah's involved. So, and the Metanoia Blues DM Zeke as well. I got the whole goddamn crew.
Yeah, if you enjoyed the way I write horror, I've also smushed that into the little warlock I play as well, directly into the eye socket. And I'm being so literal when I say that. You don't even know. If you like anything I've talked about in regards to horror and introspection and exploring the psychology of a character, that's also the warlock I play in Metanoia Blues.
Yes, and please go check out Metanoia Blues. It is on Mim's channel. So give them a look. They also do some streaming besides just D&D stuff as well. They've done Resident Evil and Spider. This one's for you, bud. The Phantom Detective. What is that?
Ghost Trick?
Yeah, Ghost Trick. Yeah.
Ghost Trick.
Yeah, Ghost Trick. I gotta finish that. But please check out all the wonderful people. And I believe I have nothing left to say. Any parting words for the gang here?
Just thank you so much for having me and listening to me talk about this. Obviously, I think about it a lot, and I appreciate anyone who will sit around and listen to me ramble about it for a little while, because I have so many thoughts. And I'd usually just sit here and draw my comics and hope people pick up on it. So it's really super rewarding to get the opportunity to sit here and just shoot the shit about it all. And I appreciate Great for inviting me on, and I appreciate all of you for being the audience to all of this. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Rommie, for being here. It has been nothing short of an absolute goddamn pleasure. So,
same here. Thank you.
Everybody, hope you have a good day, have a good night, and good luck. We'll see you around, all right? Bye.